Though there are many Best Picture Oscar winners which drop out of the collective consciousness in a few short years, Forrest Gump is unquestionably one of the most beloved and crowd-pleasing winners of the coveted award. In the 25 years since it first hit cinemas, the film has lost little of its relevance or entertainment value. And a film as iconic as this naturally has a ton of fascinating stories and tidbits surrounding its production, many of which you're probably unaware. I'm Will for What Culture, and here are 20 things you didn't know about Forrest Gump. 20. Tom Hanks took profit participation instead of a salary and made $70 million. Despite being a major Hollywood commodity in 1994, Tom Hanks wasn't paid the usual megastar salary to play the title role, instead making the riskier decision to take a cut of the film's theatrical profits instead. This, of course, ended up paying off magnificently for Hanks, given that Forrest Gump ended up grossing a stonking $678.2 million worldwide. As a result, Hanks ended up netting an estimated $70 million from Forrest Gump's theatrical release alone, making it by far the most profitable role of his career. 19. John Travolta and Bill Murray both turned down the role of Forrest. Though it's impossible to imagine anyone but Tom Hanks playing the role of Forrest, he was far from Paramount's first choice, with the studio seeking out numerous other high-profile actors to play the parts. First and foremost, John Travolta was offered the role and turned it down, a move he later came to regret, even if he ended up starring in Pulp Fiction instead and effectively revitalizing his career regardless. Similarly, Bill Murray admitted a few years ago that he turned down the role, and as brilliant as he is, it's near impossible to consider him bringing the earnest sincerity to the part that Hanks did. 18. Warner Brothers gave up the rights to the movie in 1988. Though Forrest Gump was eventually distributed by Paramount, it was originally due to be released by Warner Brothers, who bought the rights to Winston Groom's book in the mid-80s while it was still a manuscript. But in what must surely be one of Hollywood's most ill-judged business decisions ever, Warner lacked confidence in the film's commercial viability and agreed to give the rights to Paramount in exchange for their rights to the upcoming action thriller Executive Decision. Though Executive Decision was a modest box office success, it didn't make a dent compared to Gump, either financially or culturally, so Warner were surely left kicking themselves. 17. Tom Hanks' daughter Elizabeth has a cameo in the flashback scenes. Tom Hanks' 11-year-old daughter Elizabeth has a small cameo in the movie as a young red-headed girl who refuses to give young Forrest a seat next to her on the bus. She's not the only child of the cast and crew to make it into the scene though. Robert Zemeckis' son, Alexander, also appears as the boy who tells Forrest, "Seats taken." 16. The ping pong balls were mostly CGI. It's no secret that Forrest Gump was a pioneer of early photorealistic CGI, but one VFX element most audiences take for granted or most likely didn't even notice occurs during the sequence where Forrest becomes a ping pong champion. During the various ping pong matches we see, the ball was mostly digital, with the actors simply pretending to hit balls while a metronome clicker was used to time their movements. Even 25 years later, the result is virtually seamless. 15. Despite playing his mother, Sally Field is only 10 years older than Tom Hanks. Sally Field does a wonderful job playing Forrest's mother, Mrs. Gump, and through a combination of clever costume design and phenomenal Oscar-nominated makeup, Zemeckis was able to make 47-year-old Field look far older than her actual years. But what's especially interesting about Field's casting as Forrest's mother is that she's not even 10 years older than Tom Hanks, 9 years and 8 months to be precise. Hanks and Field actually played romantic interests a few years prior in the 1988 comedy Punchline, underscoring that their pairing as mother and son really shouldn't work, and yet it totally does. 14. Tom Hanks ad-libbed the line, "My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump." One of the funniest lines in the entire movie occurs after Forrest meets Benjamin Blue, who introduces himself as Bubba, to which Forrest aloofly replies, "My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump." It's a line so perfect in its purity, one would surely assume it was performed exactly as written in the script, but in fact, this line was totally ad-libbed by Hanks himself. Zemeckis liked the end result so much he kept it in the movie, resulting in a moment that efficiently outlines Forrest's charming earnestness. 13. Ice Cube turned down the role of Bubba. Though Mykelti Williamson did a wonderful job playing Bubba, like Tom Hanks, he wasn't the first choice for the role. Ice Cube, already well known for his music career and role in Boys in the Hood, was offered Bubba but reportedly turned it down because he didn't want to play a, quote, idiot. You can see how Cube might have pulled the role off, though the more laid-back, easygoing Williamson was ultimately perfect for making Bubba a supremely likable supporting character. 12. Gary Sinise had a special magic wheelchair to hide his legs. Though much of Gary Sinise's transformation into amputee war veteran Lieutenant Dan is achieved through jaw-dropping visual effects, there was also a clever practical solution for shots where Dan wasn't required to move around the room. Late magician Ricky Jay helped the production design a special wheelchair with a false bottom within which Sinise could fold his legs, giving a convincing impression that he was in fact a below-the-knee amputee. 11. Tom Hanks initially wanted to tone down the Southern accent. Tom Hanks was immediately enthusiastic about Forrest Gump after reading the script, though he had some concerns about how he was actually going to play the part, namely his accent. Both the script and the source novel called for Forrest to have a thick, distinctive Southern drawl, as seen in the final movie, but Hanks initially asked Zemeckis if he could scale the accent back. However, the director convinced Hanks to play the part as written, with the actor ultimately studying the voice of his young counterpart, Michael Connor Humphreys, who spoke with a Southern accent in real life. The end result was perfect. 10. Jodie Foster, Nicole Kidman, and Demi Moore turned down the Jenny role. Robin Wright is fantastic as Forrest's traumatized love interest, Jenny, though before she came aboard, the studio had several other actresses in mind for the part. Jodie Foster and Demi Moore both turned down the role, and while it's easy enough to imagine Foster bringing the necessary mannered charm to the role, not so much in Moore's case. As fantastic as Kidman is, it's not easy to imagine her in this role either. 9. Kurt Russell has a voice cameo as Elvis Presley. The movie is defined in many ways by the various faces Forrest ends up interacting with over the course of his life, and in one early moment, we learn that Elvis Presley once stayed at a young Forrest's home, and Forrest even taught Elvis his iconic jerky knee dance move. Though Elvis is kept out of focus for the small sequence, allowing actor Peter Dobson to more convincingly pass as the king of rock and roll, the voice was actually provided by none other than Kurt Russell in an uncredited cameo. 8. Tom Hanks only agreed to star if the film was historically accurate. Tom Hanks loved the movie's script and was keen to sign on immediately after reading it, but he had one deal-breaker condition for Robert Zemeckis, that Forrest Gump had to be historically accurate. Accepting the obviously playful nature of the film's engagement with real-world history, Hanks wanted to ensure that the events Forrest finds himself at the center of were otherwise depicted within the realm of authenticity. And while the film does in fact have a number of factual errors, it doesn't willfully play fast and loose with the history for the sake of our entertainment. 7. It was the first Best Picture Oscar to also win Best Visual Effects. Despite Forrest Gump being the 67th Best Picture Oscar winner, it was somehow the first in the award's history to also win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects. This speaks to the tendency for the Academy to give the VFX award to more commercial blockbuster films, but Forrest Gump's incredible CGI work, especially making Gary Sinise resemble an amputee and inserting Tom Hanks into archive footage, only accentuated the film's charm, and so it managed to triumph over fellow nominees The Mask and True Lies. 6. Terry Gilliam and Barry Sonnenfeld turned down offers to direct it. Despite being hot off a string of box office hits when he was hired to direct Forrest Gump, Robert Zemeckis wasn't in fact Paramount's first choice to helm the project. The film was first offered to Barry Sonnenfeld, who turned it down in order to direct Addams Family Values. Elsewhere, the studio wanted Terry Gilliam to direct, and he turned it down, later admitting that he didn't believe in the material, satisfied that he made the right choice, and that Zemeckis was the appropriate filmmaker to do it justice. 5. Life is Like a Box of Chocolates originated in the 1976 film The Likely Lads. Nobody who's ever seen this movie will forget Forrest's iconic one-liner, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." And as fantastic a piece of dialogue as it is, it wasn't an entirely original piece of writing for the movie. Though it was seemingly influenced by the opening one-liner from Winston Groom's novel, "Being an idiot is no box of chocolates," that line itself was derived from the 1976 British comedy film The Likely Lads, where a character sardonically discusses the chocolate box of life. 4. Tom Tom Hanks and Robin Wright were both sick while shooting key scenes. Though you'd never know it from watching the final movie, both Tom Hanks and Robin Wright were incredibly ill while shooting two of the film's most memorable scenes. During the American football sequence, poor Hanks was suffering from a bout of the flu, which is the last thing anyone wants when they have to dress up in stuffy sports gear and run around a football field all day. Wright got it worse though. She was stricken with a deathly cold while filming the scene where Jenny sings half naked in a nightclub. Not only did Wright have to be scantily clad for the shot, but she also performed her own singing despite her illness, and the shoot reportedly ended up lasting around 24 hours. What a trooper. 3. Joe Pesci was considered for Lieutenant Dan. Gary Sinise did an incredible Oscar-nominated job at playing Lieutenant Dan in the movie, but he only won the part after the studio considered a far more famous face. That's right, Joe Pesci was originally in contention to play the surly war vet, but for reasons unknown, they ultimately decided on Sinise instead. No word on whether a formal offer was ever made to Pesci though. 2. Hollywood accounting ensured it never made a profit, officially. Despite Forrest Gump making $678 million worldwide, Paramount used creative accounting, exaggerating the costs of production and marketing, to claim that the film never in fact made them a profit. Though this didn't affect Tom Hanks' back-end payday, it did result in the novel's author being categorically ripped off. Groom took legal action, which Paramount quickly remedied by paying out a 7-figure sum for the rights to his sequel novel, Gump & Co., while promising him a percentage of the follow-up's box office. Unfortunately for Groom, the sequel never got made, so he had to settle for the one-off rights payment instead. 1. 9/11 caused the planned sequel to be scrapped. Groom released Gump & Co. in 1995, the year after Zemeckis' movie hit screens, and by the early 2000s, plans were in place for the sequel, with returning screenwriter Eric Roth adapting Gump & Co. into a script. But fate had other plans, as Roth submitted his script one day before the 9/11 terrorist attacks, resulting in the film being delayed as studios reconsidered their projects in the context of a post-9/11 world. Ultimately, it was decided that the film's tone just wasn't appropriate following the attacks, and despite a number of attempts to revive the project, it was effectively informally cancelled, languishing in development hell forevermore. And there you have it folks, 20 things you didn't know about Forrest Gump. Feel free to drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, and drop me a follow on Twitter at YouSlyDogU. I'm Will for What Culture, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.